Welcome to Stoughton Media Access Corporation's Community Forum Show. My name is Steve Kelly. I'll be your host today. And today I have the pleasure of bringing you Robin Grimm Muksian, our wonderful town manager in Stoughton. Can't wait to hear about her adventures at her farm. And after we hear some of those stories about the farm, we'll take a minute and touch base with town politics and maybe get an idea of where we stand on some of the projects in town as well. So first, let's just welcome Robin. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you today?
Very good, very good. Okay, so we're going to try to eclipse the tremendous happenings that are going on in the Capitol today in this interview. But we're going to try to be very good for our viewing public. So, Robin, share with us a little bit, just a little background about how your love of farming has transformed and created your new life.
So I grew up, I'd always loved horses from the time I was a little girl. One of my first memories is standing in the family room with my dad watching Secretariat run down the stretch in the Belmont. Wow. And I didn't quite know what the Belmont was, but I remember watching this beautiful horse running really fast. And I can remember screaming. I can still see the TV and the color of the carpet and everything in that room and just screaming for this horse. And I think that's the first time I actually remember noticing horses that way. And my dad always would take me to Roger Williams Park and put me on the pony ride. And so for me, it was just a dream to be able to just touch a horse, you know. And my uncle, who lived in Washington, D.C., had horses in Potomac, Maryland. He loved horses, my mom's brother. And we would go out there, we would go down to visit Annapolis. My dad had actually taught at Annapolis years ago. So we would go to visit the Naval Academy and then go see my Uncle Greg. And they took us out to the farm. And again, I disappeared and they found me in a field with a mother and a newborn foal, visiting the newborn foal. I was about 9 years old. Oh. And I just wandered right out. And so my mom promised me that the next summer I could go spend 6 weeks with my Uncle Greg in Maryland, in DC and Maryland. Unfortunately, that September, my uncle died. He had a heart attack on the road with his horse trailer. Somebody cut off the trailer. The trailer jackknifed. He jumped out of the trailer because he was so worried about his horse. He had a heart condition. He was 50 years old and he literally dropped dead.
Oh my goodness.
And so my mom, devastated, she adored her brother, but was also so sad because she had promised me that next summer that I could go spend the summer with my uncle. And her best friend's daughter was going to take riding lessons the next summer. And she said to my mom, why don't you have Robin come? And my mother just couldn't say no after everything. And so I started taking lessons at a place called Dapper Dan Farm. They're actually still in existence. They still train young show riders. And I started on a pony, rode and showed within a year, 8 months I was showing and competing. And then I learned to jump on an old mixed breed, a beautiful, sweet old mixed breed that was just a place in heaven for teachers like that. And then I got my first off-track thoroughbred when I was 15, my first horse of my own. And at the time, I did come from a family with a lot of money, and the best way to get an affordable horse was to get them off the track and retrain them for show. And it made us better riders because we learned to retrain a horse that could be a little challenging. And I showed Chip. I got Chip when I was 15. I had him till I was 40. So I had him 25 years. He was 7 when I got him. So he died at 32 years old.
Is that
that was in 2008.
That seems a little longer than typical, is it?
They can live 25 to 30 years typically, provided, you know, they don't break down. And he, given how hard he worked, he had a long race career and a long show career, but we babied him and they gave him a good retirement life where I was. It's still at the same farm. And so I was at the same farm all those years. And then I also had then at that point bought a baby who had been born on that farm, a young foal. And at some point I thought, you know what? I've been helping on this farm. I worked with my barn manager for years and years. I fed 40 horses breakfast every morning and because it was a show barn and I had learned a tremendous amount. And at that point I was in my mid 40s and I said, you know what, if I'm going to do it, this is the time in my life to do it.
Yeah.
And I ended up buying the farm that I have now.
Wow.
So, but growing up at that same place for so many years, I learned so much from the barn manager. You know, we had done fence building and stalls and care, veterinary care, delivered babies, bred stallions. So we did a little bit of everything and I learned a lot. And so from there, I eventually ended up buying this place back 8 years ago. Around now, I came up and took a look at it.
And you said, wow, this is something doable and I'm going to go forward.
I set foot on the property and I said, I'm going to live here. I didn't even look at the house. I didn't care. I fell in love with the property. The barn was set up beautiful. It had a riding ring. I have trails. I have cleared fields. Everything I could want for a gentleman farm, and they're not easy to find.
Right. No, that's true. I think because they get very easily converted to other uses with the extra land.
Well, that's it. And where I live, I mean, just because of the world I work in, I'm particularly aware of it. This got rezoned Farm 5, F5 in Burrillville, which means that nothing less than 5 acres can be subdivided.
Wow.
So when I bought this, it's 8 acres and change. Somebody said, "Oh, you could subdivide it." I said, "No, I actually can't." And even if I could, obviously I wouldn't. I'm not looking to do that.
Yep.
But this property actually is pretty protected. And if you have less than 10 acres, you're pretty much going to sit with one lot.
Wow. Okay.
So it had been down to, I think, 2 or acre and a half for a while, because I have some smaller lots near me. But then they rezoned to protect this whole area as Farm 5. So Farm 5 in Burrillville, from a zoning standpoint, allows me to put just about any farm animal on the property that I want, which is pretty cool.
Well, that's a good segue into just about any farm animal. So let's maybe you can call up some pictures for Roy about which animals that we could talk about now.
All right, Roy, what do you have for us? Oh, okay. So there's my husband, Kevin. And Kevin and I met. Kevin loads horses at the racetrack in Jersey at Monmouth Park. And my property, for those of you who also deal with water tables and conservation land and all that, my property is very wet, which leads, if you look in the background, to very green grass, but very muddy paddocks. So Kevin was out there that day trying to do a little paddock cleanup for me. And Chance, our steer, decided that he thought Kevin needed some help. So Chance came to us. We got married in April of 19. And in November of 19, we finally went on our honeymoon. And we went to Kentucky, and then we swung by Western Pennsylvania, where Kevin's family has a dairy farm. And they don't keep the bull calves on the dairy farms. And they said, "Well, if you want to bring them home, you can." And Kevin had built a crate to put in the back seat, not the bed, but the back seat of my Ford. And he built it right to size in the back seat of my Ford truck. And we slid Chance right in. He was 10 days old.
Wow.
And we brought Chance home. And Chance, when he was little, that little triangle on his head was actually a perfect heart. He was an adorable little thing. So he's named after the cow on Walton's Mountain, Chance.
Oh, Chance. Okay. And you took a chance. How heavy was he when he was born?
Oh gosh, he could have been more than maybe 40 pounds. He was tiny.
Wow.
Tiny. He fit right in the crate in the back seat.
And now how many pounds is Chance?
Right now, he's probably got to come in at 800 or 900 pounds at least.
Whoa.
He's a big boy, and he's a mama's boy. So he loves when I scratch under his chin. He's definitely my boy. But I had to stop. I used to go in and sit down on the stove with him, and he'd put his head in my lap. But now I go and he pushes on me like he wants me to sit down because he wants to still sit in my lap. And I, like, Chance, buddy, you're 800 pounds. My lap isn't that big.
You don't want to get broken.
He could break me and he wouldn't know it. He's just not, he's probably not super brilliant. Let me just put it that way. He's a sweet boy and we adore him. I wouldn't say that he's brilliant.
I think people have said that about me before. Not super brilliant.
Well, I've had the same comment too, so I'm not believing it. So no disrespect to the cow.
Yeah, no. Oh, that's great. Okay, so now what are we looking at here, this next picture?
That's Leo. So I'll tell you more about Leo after. I think we have another picture of Leo. But Leo is a former racehorse from Jersey. He's not one of my racehorses. I have plenty of my own that if I wanted to keep and ride, and I would, and I do have some. But this one was one I went to try out for somebody else. And I got in the car, called Kevin, said, "Oh, I'm on my way back." This is down in Jersey. And he said, "Oh yeah, how'd you make out with that horse?" And I ranted. And he said, "Well, I could kind of hear it in your voice. I think maybe we need to bring him home for you." And so here's Leo. And he had a wonderful owner and breeder. And this is where sometimes, the racetrack gets a funny reputation for what it does with its horses after the track. This is a case where an older couple bred him and owned him through his race career. And she was so finicky about where he went, just like I am with mine. Mine get placed on lifetime leases. I don't sell my racehorses so that nothing can ever happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
They would have to come back to me before anything bad could happen.
Right.
And but this was a picture a couple weeks back in the field in the back of the farm. That actually, I believe, was the October. I had a snowstorm in October here in Burrillville. I got about 6 inches. And most of the rest of the state of Rhode Island didn't have any, but I just shot that picture because it had warmed up and I had the blankets off him and it just looked like a classic kind of New England
Yes, it is. It's
So
beautiful.
lucky we live here.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the crew. So there's the crew. In our last interview, I talked to you about the 4 that had all been at one point or another sort of bound for slaughter, sadly.
Mhm.
These 4 in that paddock are those same 4. So the little calf, you'll see a picture of her later. She's the second calf we got. We did a round trip in April out to Amish country all in one day because it was during the pandemic. We weren't allowed to stop anywhere. We didn't go to any rest areas. We literally drove 13 hours in a circle from Rhode Island to Lancaster and back to save this cow. She was on Facebook as, please come save her. The farmer's sending her to slaughter tomorrow. So I literally had 24 hours to get out to her. And Kevin said, okay, I guess we're going. And so that's April, and she's daddy's girl. She was the cow that he was with earlier is really mama's boy. This one follows him around. He did a lot of her bottle feeding. We had to bottle feed these cows.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of her. So she's very bonded to him. Next to her is Nacho in the back, the taller of the donkeys. And Nacho came to me through a wonderful woman who had rescued him from a slaughter situation. She took him in. She had been rescuing a bunch of other animals. She really wasn't looking to keep him, but if she didn't find the right home, she would have kept him. And then I happened to be looking for a donkey at the time, and our vet hooked us up together, and home came Nacho. He's been with me 7 years now.
So tell me, if you would, why would one be looking for a donkey?
They're great companions for horses,
Okay.
and they are great protectors of property. So they will ward coyotes off.
Oh, okay. There you go.
It-
That explains it.
Yep.
Because I never found myself looking for a donkey before. That's why.
Well, I could crack a few jokes about jackasses, but it's too easy sometimes. I have 3 on the farm, and let me tell you, I get my chops busted for it. And then those other 2 little ones were also rescued out of a slaughter, and I got them through a rescue. So Jack and John.
And
Here's the moon. Here's the moonrise. So my land sits really funny because you can't tell in that picture, but the moon was massive in that photo. If I came up to the house at the same exact time, that moon would be way up in the sky.
Mhm.
But my land has some really unique grading to it.
Yeah.
And when I go out back, the moon rises. That's the eastern sky where the sun would normally rise every morning, but my moon rises there every night, and or most nights. And I get these gorgeous moon rises. So that was a moonrise over the farm, and I just happened to snap that picture. I could see the animals in the background. Obviously, I was in the middle of cleaning stalls because you see my wheelbarrow in the middle of the barn.
Yeah. It looks like good instincts on your part, though, to catch it just the way it is.
Yeah, I have a thing for the moon. I'm just amazed by it. It controls the tides. It's a powerful, amazing thing. And so I have the perfect property for someone who has a thing for the moon, because all I do is watch that rise. Kevin laughs at me. I'll run out in the middle of the night, look at the moon's rising, and go down there, because down there, when I go down the driveway, it just, like I said, just the angle of the land changes. It'll be huge in the back field. And yet I'll come up to the rest of the house and it looks like it's high in the sky.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm just going over the trying to justify months and years with my my grandson D3, and we're going over the concept of how people discovered the idea that moons, well, not that he discovered moons, but that moons sort of lent themselves to people creating the idea of years and things like that. And it's quite a discussion for a 7-year-old. So I really appreciate moon watchers.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and when you think about that, and I think all the time about when the Native Americans lived on this property, and what their perception of that was, is that moon would come up like it does over the back of the property. So it's pretty cool for us.
Yeah, nice, very nice. So, here you go.
Oh, well, this picture you skipped was just a sunrise on the farm. That's that we went through quickly. I know Ray's keeping us on time. That was a picture of sunrise. That's my normal sunrise. My bedroom actually looks out to that. I'm really very blessed when I wake up to see that every day. So this is April coming back from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is Kevin and me. This is my Ford truck. We didn't even bring the crate this time. We were going to put her in a dog kennel because she was even younger than Chance. She was only 6 days old.
Yeah.
But when we got there, she was all legs. So she couldn't fit in the dog kennel. So we're like, okay, I guess we're just going to put her in the back seat. And with no kennel. And she rode home with her head between us almost the whole way home.
Wow, so she was very like docile would be perhaps the word, very easy.
Oh gosh,
manage.
yes, sweet as can be, pleasant as can be. And like I said, she is super attached to Kevin.
Wow.
She adores him. So yeah, that was our ride home, and we did that for 7 hours. There's Leo. That's the one I showed you that was in the other picture. So I've started showing and competing a little bit again. I got back into a little bit in 2015 with one of my other horses, but his feet just tend not to hold up very well. So he just has a nice life and runs around the farm. And this is Leo, the one I had tried out in Jersey. And that was at a show back in November.
Okay.
And he doesn't have a lot of show experience, but he's learning. And it's just great to be back in the saddle competitively again. It just gives you a little more polish and a little more edge. And when you're training to show, it drives you to get on more days a week than you would if you're not. You know, like any other thing, if you're training for something,
Yes.
you're motivated to have that set schedule, which is healthy for the horse and for me. So
Yeah. So then the horse like learns there's a number of days that they're sort of expected to work.
and they like it. I mean, most thoroughbreds off the track actually enjoy having a job because they're used to working every day at the track. My old show horse, the one that Dudley is growling, the Dudley, stop. The old show horse that I grew up with, his 1 day a week off he hated. He was miserable on his day off. He was cranky and ranking.
Wow.
They have tremendous work ethic. I love thoroughbreds for that reason. Thoroughbreds, as a breed, as a whole, thoroughbreds have a tremendous work ethic. You know, they're known to be a little high spirited, and that's why a lot of people shy away from riding them or showing them. But if you ride them consistently and you show them what you want, I mean, I'm biased. I just love them. But it's that work ethic. Oh, there's Pistol and Charlotte.
Okay.
Pistol is the one that if anybody watched the FinCom meetings was over my shoulder throughout like all of FinCom. So he's like the town mascot since we've done at home Zoom stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he tends to sit over my shoulder. He likes to supervise. And Mr. Hansen and Mr. Anzavino are always, and Mr. Collins always asking for him. So he's got a FinCom group. He's like one of the boys with FinCom. In fact, he was at Tufts for about 7 or 8 days on and off in the middle of our fall special town meeting with the remote. And I was literally driving home from Tufts on town meeting one night. And then I got home, turned the Zoom on, and I was apologizing because my cat's in the hospital. And everybody was more worried about the darn cat because he was, well, what do you mean the cat's not there? He's not here. He's in the hospital.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
oh, there's Kevin and John. So John's one of the rescue donkeys. Now John's funny. John's a very sweet soul. But the day, so I got him in, Kevin was in Jersey working the week I got them in. He was still down for the racing season. And he came home about a week after, and he walked in the barn, and I don't know if he resembled somebody, if Kevin resembled somebody that this donkey knew at some point, but every time Kevin walks in the barn, this donkey wants to give him a big kiss.
Wow.
Every time. Kevin can't walk in the barn without John coming to greet him. So they got caught in a little moment there. Like, so so a lot of people could say my husband does kiss a jackass every day.
You're not jealous.
Well, or I'm one of the jackasses that he kisses every day. I'm not sure.
Oh, don't say that. That's horrible. So this brings up a different question, though. I'm a little curious, and maybe some of the viewers might be as well. What about animals and COVID? Can they contract it from other animals? And is it something that affects animals, or is it bypassing animals? Do we know that?
There was a lot of buzz as to whether or not there had been cases of COVID with the animals. Animals do carry different COVID viruses, like there are different COVID viruses for humans as well.
Yeah.
We vaccinate dogs for different forms of COVID, just like the rhino flu shots for horses. I have not heard of any specific cases in animals right now. Anecdotally, there have been some stories of dogs or cats that got sick at the same time as their owners, but nothing specifically to COVID-19 that I've heard. I will say, though, I think that one of the things you have to be cautious of is the touching and the transmittal from the surface of the animal. So if my parents come up, I don't encourage them to pet my dog because I'm usually kissing and hugging and touching my dogs.
Okay,
So,
I see.
surface transmission.
Yep.
But there are diseases that are shared. The cows, for instance, sometimes when they're babies, they get scours, which is just an awful diarrhea. And people can get scours from the cow.
Yeah,
So
you wanna be
there are
careful.
there are some transmittable things. There hasn't been much. There was early on some chatter as to whether or not a cat had COVID or a tiger in a zoo had it, and they tested positive for it. But I never really heard any follow-up. And just through the people that I know, there've really been no issues.
Okay. And maybe
So this is the view.
let's move through the any of the additional slides, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the vaccine in Stoughton too. But let's
Sure.
Yeah.
This is a view from up at the house, looking down toward the farm. On the left is what was the swimming pool that we filled in for a dog run. And then you can see in front the chicken coop before you get to the back part. And then in the back, that's Frankie hanging out. Frank, my horse, hanging out. He likes to be outside in the snow. He's off to the right there. He's another off-track thoroughbred. One of the cool things is it looks like a black and white picture until you see there's a little blue plastic tub directly in the center of the picture. And otherwise it looks like an absolute black and white shot. But that is a color photograph, believe it or not.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. I love winter on the farm. I absolutely love winter. I love winter. I think it's beautiful. And this, to me to wake up before that fresh blanket of snow and look out there, and it's just gorgeous.
Very nice. Very nice.
There's Leo. That's me playing with Leo. As I said, he's the newest in the family, and I fell in love with him. Just flipped over the horse. Just, sometimes you meet, just like Frankie when I got him, sometimes you meet them and there's just something in their personality. And as I said, when he was a racehorse, the woman who owned him, an older lady and her husband, I don't want to say older, somewhat elderly woman and her husband, and she had him from birth and then raised him to be a racehorse. So they have racehorses because they love them. And you can see it in Leo's whole personality. Even when he was at the track, he had the kindest of handlers and very good trainers who were very kind and compassionate. And the result is a really well-adjusted horse.
Yeah, and it translates to other animals when they're like in the same stall or something or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. They really calm each other. And a lot of times, if you have a very high horse, you'll put it with a very calm, stable horse next to it, just to present that sense of, don't worry about anything. It's all okay.
Wow.
But my husband, I talk about this all the time. My husband's quite a horseman, and he'll always say that Leo is just such a classy gentleman. His name is Yankee Tar. They named him. They were into sailboats, and it's an old sailing term. And I said, well, it's appropriate that he ended up in New England with the name Yankee Tar.
Yeah, very nice.
Oh, it's another moon shot because I get nuts about the moon.
Yeah.
That's at the back of the farm too, and I just like I said, I just get some amazing light patterns, and with the trees and everything in the back, I shot that one night through the clouds. The moon was just kind of breaking through the clouds, so
almost looks like a sun.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I have several pictures where the moon does look like the sun here. And again, it's always in that eastern sky. So,
yep.
What else does Roy have for us?
Let's see another picture there, Roy.
My turkeys. So Roy's got the turkeys. So these turkeys are born on our farm every year. Every year in May, the flip of the calendar, I look out and the tom turkey is out there looking for the girls. And every year there's 2 to 3 females that are following him around on May 1st, between May 1st and May 3rd.
Wow.
And those females then lay their clutch on the farm. And this has been every year since I've been here. And they usually lay anywhere from 10 to 13 eggs, and turkeys raise their babies together. They take turns sitting on the clutch of eggs. The tom disappears and the mom has raised the babies. And these babies will stay on my farm for several months. They're usually born sometime the end of June, early July. And they stay on the farm till about September, October, at what time they go down the street and join the main flock.
Wow.
So they're bred up here, and then about, when they're 2 or 3 months old, I'll look down and all of a sudden you'll start seeing the flock grow. So they're bred here and they end up about a mile down the street. And every so often the whole flock will come back up and go through as adults. But the babies are here, and that was just a group of them. Right up in front in that picture is one of the mamas, but then you can see all the little ones in the back. I actually watched a mama hold off a coyote one day. It was amazing. Coyote was coming out of the side woods, and I heard all this commotion, and this turkey, this hen was just puffed up and huge. And I looked, and the other hen had taken all the babies and she was running them into the woods where they could get into the trees.
Wow.
And it was fascinating. So I wanted to help her, so I almost called. And then I said, no, don't distract her. She probably knows what she's doing. And she did. And I saw that coyote stand there and she stared down. I'll tell you, nothing like a mama's instinct to protect the young. She stood her ground. Yep. As soon as the other hen got the babies into the woods, she hot-tailed it and turned the other way. That coyote went the other way. He never went after her.
Wow. Very interesting. Huh?
It was amazing. but DEM in Rhode Island does follow the turkeys. I actually should start reporting. Because they try to keep track of the wild turkeys. They made a huge resurgence. We have them running around Stoughton every so often. So
you don't have to feed them, right? They self-feed on vegetation.
Yeah, they feed on vegetation. They're also, chickens and turkeys are very good at eating bugs and ticks and all sorts of things out of your field. So it's actually very healthy. It's just sort of nature doing its thing. And they help keep my fields bug free.
I'm always amazed when I talk to people with farms, the breadth of their knowledge, like how they know how things interrelate. And, like, that the bugs are being taken care of by the turkeys. And there's just like this breadth of knowledge between all of the farm animals that people that own farms have. It's very impressive.
Well, and you know what? It's fascinating when you get such an appreciation for nature and for the interaction of all the species and how it all works together.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Good. So
Roy, there's my greyhounds. So that's Dustin in the back. Dustin's 12 and a half years old. He's my old man. And Fancy's in front. And Fancy is just 3. And we got her right off the track in West Virginia. Dustin came from Florida. I actually drove him home with my other dog, JJ, who's since passed away. Literally flew down and threw him in the back of an SUV and drove home with the 2 of them right off the track. They hadn't even been into a foster or an adoption situation. I didn't know what they were going to, but Dustin turned out to be just an amazing dog. JJ was great. They were my ring bearers in my wedding, JJ and Dustin.
Okay.
So then when JJ passed, my husband had fallen in love with Jay and said, can we still get a relative of his? Or, Jay was almost 13 years old. I said, it might be hard to find. Well, it turned out his mother had recently, she had litters right up until 2 years ago. So this is actually JJ's niece.
Oh.
Yep. So this is JJ's. Yeah. So his mother had a litter. Of that litter, his sister had this baby. So it's his niece. So when we found her, we drove to West Virginia to get her. So we drive everywhere to get these animals.
It's a lot of connectivity too, I noticed.
And I'll make a little announcement. We're waiting to hear word for sure, but I got a friend messaged me yesterday, and she sent me a picture of a 15-year-old little Italian greyhound whose owner passed away. It was an elderly person who passed away. And apparently the daughter kept his other dogs, but not this dog. And then they had it on Facebook, free to good home, which is like a death wish, unfortunately, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody brought him in and then got him to a rescue, and they called me and said, well, yeah, take a look at this dog. Before I could even get the words out of my mouth, Kevin took one look and said, okay, when are we going to pick him up? So we're just waiting for final approval from the foster and the vet to clear him.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we will be adding a new addition, a 15-year-old dog to our family. So
Now, how long would those dogs live?
He's probably at the end of his life, but we just want him to have a home before he passes, since I mean, for that poor dog to have lost its owner at 15 years old, he's got to feel awfully dislodged and alone. And the other dogs that he lived with are gone. So we figured if we could just take him in, whether it's a year or 6 months, whatever we can give him.
Yeah.
And give him a home and give him love for however long we're blessed enough to have him. So fingers crossed all goes well. He was going to the vet today, so we should hear today if we're going to be able to get him.
Okay. Wow. That sounds like.
So there's the
terrific news.
announcement.
There's your announcement.
There's a new addition to the town manager's family.
Okay. I like it. Good.
Broke on community forum. We broke the news. Well, they're my chickens.
Tell us about these marvelous, stunning looking creatures.
Aren't they handsome? So Charlie is the white one. I adopted him. Somebody had gotten him. They didn't realize he was a rooster. They weren't allowed to have roosters where they live. And they put on Facebook, does anybody want a rooster? I said, sure. So we got Charlie. In the meantime, I had gotten the other 4, and I was told they were all hens. And then I ended up in the same boat because 2 of the alleged hens, the 2 next to Charlie, are not hens. So now the problem is I have 3 roosters and 2 hens. That math does not work.
Okay.
And in the world of hens, that really doesn't work. So I've since added 4 more hens, but a hawk took 2 of them, unfortunately. So now I have a total of 4 hens and 3 roosters. But that shot, I happened to be leaving the barn, and the beauty of having cell phones is you're always taking a picture. I turned around and they were all just lined up there on that perch. And it was November and the sun was right and the colors were right. And I was like, if that's not fall in New England.
Mm-hmm. Looks beautiful.
And the breed, I guess the breed of chicken, not Charlie. Charlie's a leghorn, like Foghorn Leghorn, the character, the cartoon character. But the other ones, I believe that there might be chicken experts out there who know better than I do, but I believe they are Americanas. Okay. That's all I know. Now Reba, the one on the very far end, she lays eggs. She stopped for the winter, but she was producing an egg a day when we came into winter. I'm hoping this little one in front, whose name is Esther, I'm hoping she starts producing eggs soon too.
Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we had fresh eggs from Reba, one a day.
Wow. Yeah, see, now I know why I'd have chickens. So you'd
Because you
get the
get eggs.
eggs.
They actually produce something on this farm.
Yeah, okay, as opposed to being on the recipient end, you get you
Yeah,
get
it's
something nice.
decorative. Yeah.
Yeah, production. All right.
Oh, so there's the dogs again. And that little one, that little mutt is Dudley. Dudley's a rescue. He was at a Tractor Supply at a rescue event in New Jersey. I had gone to Tractor Supply while Kevin was at the starting gate loading horses. And I saw him as part of this rescue, East Coast Paws and Claws out of Jersey. And I saw him and I'm like, oh my God, he's adorable. He was a puppy at the time. So I FaceTime or what's up to Kevin. And I said, look at this. He's in the middle of the starting gate loading a racehorse. And I'm like, look at this dog. He's like, okay, get him. You're going to get him, aren't you? And I'm like, I
Yeah.
get him. And so home came Dudley with us. And so Dudley was from an Arkansas, one of those situations in the South where they get, litter gets dumped off and these rescues come in and get them out, because if they don't, they get euthanized. And so, our attitude is anyone we can take in, it just makes another slot for another one to get rescued,
So
So
tell us a little bit about how did you become so committed to doing rescue work? Because, a lot of people, they get them bred instead. They'll go to a breeder, but you're very obviously very committed to going the rescue route. Where did you first get that bug?
it's funny. The greyhounds are like the racehorses that in years past, it was a horrible industry, but in the past 30 years, greyhounds have done a wonderful job with placement. They're not really rescues. They truly find adoptive homes for their dogs. And so I got to the point where I fell in love with the breed and I said, you know what, I'm just going to adopt greyhounds, and it gives a home to them. It works out for everybody. And again, they need homes and they're great pets. So I got into it a little bit that way with the greyhounds, but as far as rescuing or taking in whatever needed a home, I mean, when I was a little kid, I was bringing home the stray cat in the street, so it's sort of always been
Okay.
my poor mother. So it's sort of always been, and my mother tells me that her older brothers did the same thing when they were little boys, that, my poor grandmother never knew what was coming home. One had a squirrel, one had a bat, one had, so I think I can blame genetics.
Okay, then that's
But we really do. There are certain breed dogs that I love, and I've had. I had a beagle that I had gotten from a local breeder one time years ago, and there are certain breeds you love, but then you get a mutt like Dudley, and in fact, we just sent his DNA off because we just are so curious that we got a little DNA kit on him. So I've been following his DNA. I should have results in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we have a little discussion on what Dudley really is, but what we do know is he's really cute. So
Okay.
that's what he really is.
And apparently takes good care with the other dogs as well.
Oh yeah, they all get along. Everybody gets along around here.
We need some of that in society. We need a little
Yeah,
more
no
of the-
fighting in this home. We do enough of it out there. If you're gonna come in this house, you cannot fight.
No.
That's just the rule.
No fighting, huh?
I do enough of it at work every day. I'm usually ticking somebody up. Oh, here's my plunge picture. So this was January 2nd. We normally do this January 1st. But because of COVID, Special Olympics Rhode Island could not hold their annual plunge.
Yep.
So they asked us all to plunge individually and video it and send it to them, and they would do sort of a compilation.
Yep.
So I ended up joining up with 2 other plungers who've done it for years. And we went January 2nd. The temperature was lovely, but the wind was brutal. It was an
Okay.
offshore wind. And when I tell you the sand was blowing in our faces, and I would have rather had it 20 degrees colder than it was and not had the wind.
And
But that was just out of the water. That was just out. My hair's still wet. So I've done this for about 11 years now.
and I'm not seeing Kevin in a suit right now.
No, Kevin is my wingman. Everybody
Okay.
needs a wingman, and his job is to hold a towel. And I will
Okay.
tell you this, with this case, because there was only a few of us on the beach, it wasn't so bad. But when there are 700 people and you don't know where you can put your towel down and get it when you get out, because
Yep.
you really need your towel and rope, your wingman is critical.
Okay.
So the first year Kevin and I started dating, it was about after, it was like 4 or 5 days later. I'm like, oh, I'm going to jump in the ocean on January 1st. You want to come? He's like, okay.
Yeah.
And he said, what do I do? I said, hold my towel and find me when I come out with the other 700 people. And
Okay.
he did. So, so he is officially officially the wingman. I think I'll get him in next year, though.
Well, that'd be nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, how very nice of you to share those photos. Um, are we ready, I think, to talk a little bit about the town, maybe the theater and the famed center where we're hoping to get some development there and see what kind of an update we might have?
Yeah, so the center is going through the planning process. The old Malcolm Parsons project, as we call it,
Yep.
is well into the planning process. It's in public hearing. We're very excited. It doesn't seem at this point like there are any major glitches to having it developed. Like everything else, things have been slowed down a little bit because of COVID and virtual meetings and all of those things. But none of the current slowdowns that we've had are actual slowdowns in the development process. It's just getting it on an agenda, and our planning board agenda wonderfully has been packed with development.
Okay.
So that's a wonderful thing for the town. And so that project, I mean, we are really still hopeful that late winter, early spring, we might see foundation if all goes well at this point. We are waiting. We should hear within the next 30 days or so on another grant for the sewers. You know, we got 2.5 million from the MassWorks grant.
Right.
We are up to possibly getting close to the same amount from a federal grant.
Okay.
If we would get that, the borrowing for that sewer would truly be minimal.
Good.
The burden on the taxpayer would be negligible at that point.
Right. And the benefit, it will be tremendous we're so close to Boston, so that having sewer ability in buildings, especially for non-office buildings, I'm thinking, but maybe office too. I'm only thinking that because of COVID, office buildings, as the leases come due, they're starting to not be filled in the Boston area. And
Yep.
people, I think warehouse space and things like that would probably drift this way rather than that way.
And we're really looking at light manufacturing. If we can get some, environmentally friendly light manufacturing, things like Global Solutions is expanding, Global Composites that have the incentive on town meeting,
Yep.
Having a company like that expanding in town. There is, COVID has sort of hurt the hotel industry, but we have a hotel in the wings that once things turn around, has indicated an interest in building there now because there will be a sewer.
Right.
And a hotel is a tremendous asset for us. That benefits restaurants and shops, plus we get a rooms fee from the state. So that, we get that, that's tremendous. We're really hopeful for the 23 budget that our growth number, we've seen consistent good growth increase,
Right.
but we're really confident by what's in the pipeline right now. It won't make the tax rolls where we can count it for the 22 revenue growth.
Right.
But we're very hopeful with it for 23. We may have 3 or 4 building projects on, good sized building projects. And that's not even including what we're anticipating from the sewer. So I'm very hopeful for 23. And if I can take a second to talk about the budget.
Yes, please.
We presented a budget that had a 1.83% increase over last year. That's historically low. That's about as close to level funding as you can get without cutting services.
And by the way, let me just say this, as a tax-paying entity that, I have property in Stoughton, and we're thankful that the increases are, let's say, average and low. We really struggle with each new increase, especially now with COVID, like hurting the income side for business owners. Yeah.
Well, and what we were finding was we you do the 2.5, you have the Prop 2.5, and you do the 2.5, but your increases are coming in at 3.5 and 4%. You can't keep doing that, and we're not going to do overrides. That's just not fair to do to the public right now. And so it was imperative that we come in low. And on top of it, with renegotiating contracts, no more having automatic 2.5% increases for labor. That's helped tremendously. We kept our healthcare contribution on the low end for our reserve fund, but our reserve fund was pretty solid with that. And we just found we budgeted very conservatively on the high end, if you will, for what we were going to owe Norfolk County Retirement. We don't have control of that number, but we just found out that we actually had over budgeted $240,000. So that little gap that we had from what I presented for the town, what the schools asked for, and what our total revenue was, we had about a $380,000 gap, which even with COVID is the smallest gap we've had in most people are telling me recent history. I know, at least since I've been here.
Right.
That brings that down to $140,000, which, on a on a total $100 million budget is actually pretty
Yes, that
negligible.
is. Yeah.
So we're really excited about that. And we budgeted very prudently, very conservatively on revenues for restaurants and room tax, obviously with
Yep.
COVID. But again, come 23, we're going to see those bounce back.
Mhm.
And when we feel good about that. So I'm really pleased. When I came on board, I remember during my interview saying that, the town is in good shape from the standpoint it has good stabilization funds. It's been very wise with that end of things. And that's why the bond rating was okay.
Mhm.
But there have been a lot of structural holes. There have been a lot of, those patches in the budget. And they come home to roost at some point. And then FinCom demanding a reduction in the use of free cash, appropriately so, because that's a plug too.
Mhm.
You want to use some free cash because you don't want to hold taxpayer money.
Right.
A little surplus should go back to the budget. But when you're using too much of it, what happens in the year that you don't have it? Now you've got a structural deficit.
Which this might be that year because of the COVID.
Sure. And so now we've been able to comply with FinCom's reduction on that. We're making our increases much more reasonable. Our salaries are within range of what we can afford. And as a result, our budget doesn't have structural holes, and we're not looking to fill, six, seven, $800,000 between us and the schools and say, well, who's going to come up with it? Where's it going to come from? Are we going to pull it out of other funds? Are we going to play around and wiggle our revenues around, which is never healthy? And we're at a point now where we don't have to do that. And that's really a testimony to my staff for their absolutely fiscal prudent efforts. We've done some restructuring. It's a credit to Dr. Marcus for taking very seriously the financial impact of school budgets, which does not always happen, frankly.
Yep.
Sometimes superintendents do not take that into consideration,
Mhm.
But he has. And I appreciate that from him. He had a relatively low increase as well on his side, probably historically for the school department. It was higher than ours, but it was historically low for the school department.
Right.
And it was less than 2.5. I think he was at 2.2 or 2.3, so which is excellent. So, I mean, we're not considering, if we had not had COVID, if we had not had the revenue dip, projection dip because of COVID, we actually would not have had any difference. We would have been right there.
Okay. You know what I
Without
think
any
might happen, and I don't know that you could even address it in this forum this quickly, but there's some sense that there'll be some restructuring in school expenditures because of wherever we go with this non-in-person classroom stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if how's that gonna wiggle out? I don't think anyone knows, but it might seriously affect budgets.
It is going to affect budgets. I
Perhaps in a
mean,
good way.
in some ways, we bought a lot of technology with the CARES money, and we gave the schools more than half of what came in for CARES for the town. We gave over to the schools, I think 1.5 million out of the 2.5, and to buy technology
Yep.
and laptops, Chromebooks, all those things. And obviously they have a shelf life. But what it did do is it helped this year because the routine upgrades we didn't have to do. But the long term of what's going to happen to learning, I don't know. I mean, and I think a lot's going to depend on, do we bounce back and say, okay, the pandemic is sort of this one time, hopefully once in a lifetime nightmare?
Yep.
Or are we going to get back to a full range of normal or not? And where we're going to see the implications of that is how management handles that in labor relations. I think where the rubber's really going to meet the road is,
Mhm.
what do we do? You can't just, and realistically, it's very easy to say, well, if they're online, they can have, 40 kids to a teacher instead of 20. It doesn't work that way. I mean, I've taught even at the college level online in non-pandemic situations.
Yep.
It doesn't mean just increase students, but it does change the dynamic maybe of what you need for teachers and what you need for building space. Those are the things that are going to have to be looked at. And there are going to be labor questions associated with it. Where can we save and where are we going to have to spend a little more? I think it's a huge question, and I think it's something maybe the superintendent certainly would be better suited to answer than me, but I do think, there's
going to be change.
change.
We can go.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit. I think everybody's wondering about any potential help that the town might have for vaccinations, or at least steerage as opposed to help. Like many people are, I noticed that, on the news down in Florida, they're in line overnight. And pretty disruptive about that. But there are people here that don't even have an opportunity to get in line overnight. And people are justifiably hopeful and concerned. Is the town in a position to be able to help with that, or is it just beyond your scope?
A little of both. So we have been authorized, and we have a shipment coming for our own first responders, our police and fire.
Mhm.
Um, because again, if they get sick and they have to quarantine, forget the logistics of having to staff the overtime cost for us. There's a huge town cost when we have police and fire who
Right.
can't come to work,
Okay.
particularly for quarantine, and their own safety. I mean, the police officers in the back of a patrol car are exposed to everything. You know, they don't know what they're getting.
Okay.
A firefighter too, except that at least he or she knows when they're going into the house, the person has COVID symptoms. But a police officer put somebody in the back of a patrol car for something, and they're exposed to all sorts of things. So police and fire are per the governor are in the first tier. So they're the governor who set up tiers. We're bound by the tiers that the governor has set up.
Right.
The next tier are going to be the elderly. At the end of this phase, we think February, March timeframe.
Mm-hmm.
And Janice Bruce, my executive director of human services, and many of you know Janice, and she's done visiting nurses for years, and she's just phenomenal, and she's from Stoughton, and she just cares so much.
Right.
And she, when I put her into that executive director position, not only has visiting nurses, but she oversees our council on aging now,
Okay.
falls under her. So she is going to work to set up clinics for elderly,
Nice.
where the town can provide vaccinations, like we can do flu shots. We'll provide vaccinations. But the big thing is going to be coordinating it, and we can do online registration, but a lot of our elderly also aren't necessarily going to register online. But the last thing we want is elderly to come stand in line, like you said, and then all of a sudden we don't have any
Yeah.
left. We
Right.
ran out, and so that's the last thing we want to do to people. Plus, it's 2 rounds, and we really have to make sure people come back for the second vaccine, because if they don't, we've wasted the first one. And I mean, this is a double shot. So now we have to, if we set up 2 clinics, it's really 8, 4 visits, I should say. So it's going to be a challenge. And last night at the select board meeting, in fact, Ms. Walsh, Cynthia Walsh came on, and she was asking if we'd use our senior buses. If we put 3 people on a bus, we'd somehow control the flow. And she has a great idea. So I think we're going to be looking pretty aggressively. Janice did sit in on a conference on distribution, vaccine distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So she's on the front lines of this for us. And a lot's going to depend on how the Commonwealth rolls out its phases. We can't jump ahead and use the vaccine for things that the Commonwealth,
Yep.
the governor's not allowing for.
Yep. No. You have to
But as
follow.
soon as we can, we'll be on it. And I'll use social media to get that word out. We'll use select board meetings, things like community forum, wherever we can get the word out as to availability, we will.
Okay. Very good. What about the theater? We didn't talk about the theater.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the theater, and then we'll talk about some other stuff.
There hasn't been much movement, and not for lack of trying. The Friends of Stoughton Theater is a great group of people. They had raised some money for it, but it really is a multi-million dollar restoration.
Yes.
And it'd be ideal, and I've seen it happen where I've worked in communities where I've worked, where a private investor who loves theaters comes in and just dumps $20 million into a building.
Yeah.
And creates this beautiful place, but they're basically financial losers for from a standpoint of,
Yep.
of economic benefit. Some
Right.
of them do all right if they're neighborhood theaters and the building is in relatively good shape. But if you're dropping 15, 20 million, even 10 million into a building, you better be making some serious money back to be able to cut that mortgage, that construction mortgage. And we just can't take it on at this point. I mean, right now our goal is to make sure that the buildings we do own are all being used or sold or whatever it is we may be doing
Maintained, yeah.
with them. Maintained. So we just can't take it on as a town right now.
Yep.
I would love to have somebody private come in, but I'm just not sure. And we do, Pam McCarthy, our economic development director, does work with the owner, does talk to the owner. And at one point it seemed like there might be some interest in working with us, but we're not getting that sense anymore that there's that much of an interest. So it's unfortunate. And I haven't stopped keeping my eyes open, but
Okay.
I'm not at the point where I feel comfortable saying, oh yeah, I got a good feeling about it. I wish I could.
So we're right in the month for making our New Year's goals. So does the town of Stoughton want to express like a New Year's goal through you, or what do you think?
My New Year's goal is that the Malcolm Parsons building is built.
Okay.
That's
a
my
New Year's goal.
personal
Okay.
work goal, my career goal,
Okay.
that one.
That
I mean,
one,
I
yeah.
have my goals from the town. I have my goals from my bosses at my select board who say these are my actual goals. But my
Okay.
personal Robin,
Yeah.
the town manager goal, that
Okay.
we look out across the street from town hall and we see a building.
All right. No, I think that's a great goal, because I think it will definitely help everybody to feel a little better. as we move forward. It's a good community of people that we can serve better by having a very like a nice front to the town through that area.
It'll be an anchor for the downtown development. It really will.
Anchor, good word. Before we go, I wanted to thank people, and if you have anything else before I thank my producer, Roy Cohen, and his grandson, Kyle, I think, and a few other people, CJ in the background, Mike Hammond, all of our people, Stoughton Media Access Corp, that are being that really strong in the background. They don't get the exposure, the front face, but I always like to thank them. And are there a couple of people that you might want to, if I limit you to 3 so that the other 2,500 that should be thanked won't be mad?
Oh yeah. No, first I would like to thank Stoughton Media Access because it really gives me an opportunity to get my message out and to keep the public aware of what we are doing. And I that's a critical point for me, is to always have the public aware of what's going on in town hall. And forums like this help tremendously, even if it's not talking about my cows. But we do talk about the town too. And I just generally, I just want to take the opportunity. We're at the end of a year, beginning of a new year. I just want to take the opportunity to thank the town. I mean, it's a phenomenal place to be. I'm very lucky to work in a town like this. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful for the welcome that I've gotten. I'm just over 2 years here now, which by Stoughton standards is actually, I guess, a long tenure. But I'm enormously grateful for that. And I have to thank my staff. I mean, I could come here and talk about all these projects and yeah, it's great, everything's going well, and my budget's good and all that. It's not me, and it's just a tremendous team of people I have working for me. So, and they work for the town. Ultimately, it's a tremendous team of people working for the people of Stoughton. And so that's why I want to just collectively thank my team, because they're just amazing.
Well, that's a great way to end our program. And I also just want to throw out a thank you to all the viewers who dutifully watch the show and try to get us to do some good stuff. We look forward to any commentary you have. You want to send it to Community Forum with Roy Cohen and Mike Hammond over there, the station director. So thank everybody for watching. And Robin, thank you for being our guest. You're a very good guest to have on with a fountain of information, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.